Welcome to Spectrum Perspectives, real talk with parents, professionals, and autism advocates. With your host, Cindy Gellermini.
Hi, everyone. This is Cindy with another episode of Spectrum Perspectives, and I have our old friend back, Katie Asher. Hi, Katie. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. So good to see you again, Cindy.
So, last time I had you on, I think it was like 3 years ago, and your book had not even come out yet. You were
Wow.
waiting to get copyright
hmm
permission for some songs that were in the book. Meanwhile, here it is. I have
Yes.
it, and I just wanted to show you all of these dog-eared,
Dog-eared.
highlighted
Yes.
pages that I have of all of this information that you talked about in the book. And that's why when I did my mom's retreat, I had you and Houston come on to speak because I wanted you to share some of your wealth of knowledge with them. Um, and
And
that
I
is on,
think
so
that,
both are on my YouTube channel. If anybody wants to go back and
yeah,
watch.
I've had people comment that, like, sending it out saying, oh my goodness, this is the best explanation of apraxia and what our kids are dealing with. And which I'm thrilled that, because that was exactly, and that was what you saw in that part of the book was
Mhm.
this is knowledge they need to understand. And I think that's the issue is it has been misdiagnosed and misunderstood. And so because of that, it has been mistreated.
For sure. For sure. And every time I hear about it and, read about it, see it on video on Facebook, I get upset, and I start getting
I
so angry. And I'm like, I gotta push that down. I gotta stop. I gotta stop getting upset because we're
I
so
don't,
wrong. We were so
yeah,
wrong
yeah.
about
And
autism. And I'm like,
I, I don't even know, like, I think I get overwhelmed by the depth of the injustice that was done to them.
yeah.
And it still is ongoing. I mean, we actually are now beginning to see some light, which is fantastic, and some hope and some progress, both in the sheer number of individuals spelling, which, there are spellers that say that what's going to change this is the sheer numbers. Lily says that.
The
And
numbers of what?
spellers.
Spellers, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's going to be the thing that creates the shift, that creates the changes the perception and creates the momentum that will force the change in the institutions. But I have basically had it with the institutions. Not only are they wrong, they refuse to admit they're wrong, they refuse to change, they're just digging their heels in, which makes it worse.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
actually exposes that there's some motive,
Mm.
because if you realize that you're wrong about something, you immediately say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize. Let me fix this."
Right, which is how I feel about everything that I've learned over the past 3 years. It's like you can go
Right.
back and watch my old videos and you can see how I talked to Robbie like he was a baby, how I told everybody to go out and get jabbed. Like everything I said and did was wrong.
Mhm.
But I'm willing to admit that I was wrong.
And there's nothing wrong with having the humility to admit that you were wrong. I mean,
Hmm.
one of the things I always talk about is that enlightenment came with a heavy dose of guilt.
Hmm.
And it did. And that's still true today. I still have guilt. And in my eyes, the only way to even come close to addressing this guilt is to right the wrong.
Is to fix it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why we do what we do.
Hmm.
And I had a
And
friend
for
who,
me, there's nothing I can do about it anymore.
yeah, I
I
disagree.
mean, for my son. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's this is what I keep saying about spelling. I keep telling the parents, it's too late for me. I can't take Robbie to go to a practitioner anymore, but you can.
Yeah.
Please, please just try it. Please just go.
Well, your determination and your advocacy, it's not even personally, benefiting you, is so kind. What a kindness that you are doing for other people, that you're taking your own pain and you are using that pain to actually bless other people and prevent them from experiencing your pain.
Mhm.
It is such a kindness that you are doing.
It's become a passion. now. I went to a book signing party last night for a friend, and it had nothing to do with autism, but I was talking to somebody about it, and I got on the topic of spelling, and like you could just like I just got so excited. I started telling her everything, and I said, in case you can't tell, I'm very passionate about this.
Well, and I was telling someone about because like of course all the Trump announcement was all in the news, and I
Mhm.
was telling and somebody I have coffee with these old guys at McDonald's, and so anytime they see something in the newspaper, because they of course still read the newspaper,
Right,
they have to bring it to me. And
right,
I'm like, so I literally sat down and there's like a pile of papers with things
right,
underlined for me to
right.
read, and I was just laughing. And so I'm like addressing what they're showing me in the paper.
Yeah.
And I'm getting all passionate and
Yep.
everything, just like you were talking about.
Yep. Yep.
And the man, one of the men that I have coffee with, he lost his wife to breast cancer, and it absolutely destroyed him. And he said, "You feel about autism like I feel about breast cancer."
Hmm.
And this is the reality, is that we're talking about saving people's lives. And this
Right.
isn't metaphorical, this is literal.
Right. Right. Yeah, so you just reminded me that's how we got onto the subject when I was talking to this woman, because as soon as I mentioned autism, they're like, "Oh, well, what did you think about the Tylenol thing when that came
Yeah.
out?" I'm like, "Ah, here we go."
There we go.
And I said to her, I said, "Well," I gave her like my first grade explanation of it. And I was like, "As a matter of fact, I'm going to be talking to Katie tomorrow and I'm going to let her explain it."
Yeah, and the thing is it's complicated, and that's okay. It's okay to not know everything that's complicated. And what I'm trying to do is to take the complicated explanations and bring them down to a level where the rest of us can understand and make sense of it. And by doing so, it brings light and awareness, and then we can move in a different direction. And that's
Mhm.
really my goal.
Mhm. Okay, well, we're on the subject right now, so let's talk about it. Let's talk about it to people like me that we are. Science was never
Mhm.
my thing. Research is not my thing,
Yeah. And
and
the
that
thing
is
is
your strong point. It is not
that
mine.
and we
I
all have
need
different
mental
gifts.
pictures of
Right.
everything.
We all have different gifts.
Yeah,
And so
right.
the way I talked about it, in because I wanted to make it personal. I can sit here and I can talk about the science, and it will seem like it'll just
Hmm.
fly right over everybody's head. But when
Right.
I take people through what happened to me and my
Hmm.
son, then it becomes, oh, I see how that happened.
Right.
Houston, of course, is my second child. And what happened with him was I was a good girl and I did what I was told. And so I went to well checks and gave him every single thing that they recommended.
Hmm.
And this was, he was born in October of 96. So the majority of the events that I'm talking about happened in 97 and
Right.
early 98.
Right.
Just
Now,
to give
we
you,
did talk about the rash and all that stuff. I'm pretty sure in our
I
first
probably
interview. So I
did.
don't
Well,
want
I'll
to.
just
So
remind everybody.
yeah, yeah. I just
Um,
want to remind the listeners and the viewers that to go back and listen to your original interview,
mhm.
so that we don't spend too much on this because I
Okay,
want to talk about other
I will
stuff too.
try to. Okay, so
I more just want to hit just because RFK and the president came out with that
okay,
announcement, and I heard what you said in your podcast, and I totally agree. This is what I keep telling everybody. They should not have let Trump do that
yes,
interview. They should have
okay,
allowed a doctor to
yeah.
explain, because all
Mhm.
I heard was do not take Tylenol 20 times. And I'm like,
Yes.
yeah,
So
but why? But why?
while I greatly appreciate the administration
Absolutely.
addressing what we as parents have known for decades,
Mhm.
I absolutely do not think that Trump is a formidable communicator in terms of scientific material. And they definitely needed to have someone else
Yes. I
communicating
think
this
his heart
information.
is in the right place, but he
Yes.
should have let someone else do the
He
splaining.
absolutely should. And I think he just became dogmatic, which is what he does. He's
Mhm.
hyperbolic and dogmatic, and that came out. He was exactly like himself.
Right. Right.
I mean, so basically, I'll try to get this pretty quickly. But what happened with Houston was it was his the event started happening with his DTP hip shot. Now, I always try to explain to everybody, I do think that he probably was not producing enough glycoprotein. And the reason I think that is because of the reaction that his body ended up having. And glycoprotein is a protein in the cell that is basically the cell identifier. It's the name tag. It puts the name tag on your body, on every part of your cell, so that the immune system will not attack itself. That's its purpose. Okay. So either it was not enough or not functioning properly, but clearly something was going on. He received the DTP hip shot. This is actually the live cell vaccine. And now it's what we would call the DTaP. But that's essentially what it was. This was actually the vaccine that was the cause of all of this uproar in with parents and bringing cases against big pharma because of this particular vaccine. And
Right.
this was what the
Let me just
reason.
remind you not to say the V word because I don't
Oh,
want to get censored.
oh, let's
Call
see.
it an inoculation or a jab or something.
Okay.
You could
All
say
right.
DTP, just don't say the V
Okay.
word.
All right. So, well, this was, it's actually the name of the law, though, you know? I mean, the name is actually in the law.
You could say Vax, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
And
anyway,
I'm only saying this because this was during COVID, though, that I had an old video
right.
from 7 years earlier that they pulled down because I said that
Wow.
word. I mean, they
Okay.
may
So,
not do it anymore, but I don't want
to
to lose
be
it.
on the safe side. So
Mhm.
this was the particular inoculation that caused this particular bill that gave big pharma immunity. It was this shot. And so this was and so they basically told Reagan he was going to veto it, but his point was make them safe. And they said to him, we can't. You cannot make them safe. This is why we need immunity. So the idea that they're now saying they are safe is absolutely hysterical, because if they were safe, then we could just follow normal due process. And that would be the case, but they couldn't make them safe. Here's why they can't make it safe. So, and this is where this happens. So Houston receives the shot. He reacts. He gets these little red freckles. He breaks out all over. We end up at the hospital. And the hematologist, for people who tell me that it's not a vaccine injury, I'm like, well, that's not what the hematologist said.
Mhm.
And the hematologist said it was either leukemia or immune thrombocytopenic purpura. And whenever they finally got the testing, she came back and she says, this is a immune thrombocytopenic purpura. This is a vaccine injury, which I let everybody know. I'm sorry. Well, that's what she said. I'm quoting her. I mean,
I know. It's like, how do you talk about this and not say the
this is
word?
what's so ridiculous is that this was pre-control.
Yeah.
And so she was saying this was a doctor's explanation for a medical condition. And so now I can't use what a doctor said. You know what I mean? It's crazy. But this was before the big push against the anti-Vs.
Mhm.
And so this was pro-V or pre-V, or I don't even
Yeah.
know. But anyway, so we got gamma globulin, IVIG, and like several rounds of that. They were doing everything they could. And at some point they're like, okay. But what we didn't know was what the long-term effects were going to be. And when we went for the MMR, I told the pediatrician, I don't want him to have any more because of the reaction he had before. And the doctor told me, and this is what I just feel like a fool, like a complete foolish little girl for not defending my son the way I needed to, which was to run. This is what I should have done. And I said, I don't want to. I'm concerned he'll have another reaction. Clearly his immune system, it doesn't work properly, is what I said to the doctor. And the doctor said to me, that's a fluke.
Mm.
And that's when everything went downhill so fast it wasn't even funny. That's when the big giant, and this is where you were laughing about me earlier with my hands over my ears, but this is where the big giant red cheeks, the rashes everywhere, the squinting everywhere, and the hands over the ears. That's when all of that happened. And then the running, the nakedness, the not being able to sleep, the screaming, the looping, the seemingly completely, the regression was happening wildly fast. Now, what I found out later, years later, is a complete, like the whole regression. People are like, how does this happen? So an autoimmune encephalopathic event will trigger demyelination in the brain. And I actually had someone who listened to the episode that I just did and contacted me and sent me the pictures of her daughter's brain scan where it showed the white spots where demyelination was happening. And they immediately started doing all these autoimmune, the IVIG, like just tons and tons of immune therapy. And they were actually able to stop the encephalopathy and reverse it.
Wow.
And she has recovered. And that is incredible.
What kind of doctor was that?
Well, they actually had to go all over the place to find it. And the ER doctors were, of course, like, this is, they were objecting. And it wasn't until she got some specialist of some kind in there who was like, they were showing the doctor videos. And there was a particular video with that the doctor identified as brain inflammation. It was something that the child was doing that. And I do know, but I'm trying to like be very vague. So, because I don't want to share the details of their story, but it was something that the child was doing in the video that the doctor identified as that is encephalopathy. So that's when he ordered the brain scan. And then all these people who had been wrong were having to apologize and recognize that what was going on. And so anyway, that's where regression comes from. But so I didn't know any of these things. I didn't know about, histamine reactions. I didn't know about any of these reactions. But what actually happens, and this is what's so important, this is why we're having this conversation, this is what Trump did not do an adequate job explaining, is the process that goes into the body's reaction when you receive a inoculation. And what they do is they use an attenuated virus, which means, and the DTP that Houston had received earlier was actually the live cell, right? This is an attenuated virus, which means it's a dead virus, but the body, to get the immune system to respond, they put in an adjuvant to force the immune system to react. Now, at the time when Houston was first, I'm trying to figure out what was going on, everyone was talking about mercury I'm looking up, and this is before the, we had search engines. So I was literally like painstakingly going to medical sites and trying to like look up. It was so much work, but I was looking up and I found all these links to certain reactions from mercury poisoning. And I was like, maybe this is real. Maybe this is what this is. So it took forever because
What year was this? What year was Houston born?
He was born in 96. He received the DTP in 97. He probably received the MMR at the very end of 97 or the very beginning of 98. And it was rapidly declining after that.
I just asked because Robbie was born in 89, and that's the year they started putting the V's in mercury. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So this was 6-7 years later. So, okay,
So,
go ahead, keep going.
Okay, so a couple of years later, it took me forever to find a doctor that would do metal testing on him. And so we finally did. We did all these different tests. And I get the test back, and I think that I'm going to see high levels of mercury. And this is what I was showing you before. So down here at the bottom is this line. Right. And anything above this line would have been considered toxic. Okay. And this short little line over here was the mercury.
Right.
And then I saw this other line that went all the way to the top.
All the way off the page.
It literally went off the page where they couldn't categorize how much aluminum was in his body. And that was like, aluminum? Why is it, what's aluminum? I mean, all I knew about aluminum was like aluminum cans, aluminum foil.
Foil, yeah.
It never even occurred to me there could be aluminum in a vaccine. I didn't know anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always this kind of, where is that coming from? What is that? And it didn't make sense to me. And of course, I had no idea about the chemical structure of aluminum and what that meant and what the effects of that are.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew that my son had too much. And I remember going to the doctor and showing them the results and saying, we have to get it out of him. And I remember what they said so clearly. And they said, no, you cannot chelate. It would destroy him. And I was like, how could that destroy him? And it's because I didn't understand the chemical nature of aluminum, because essentially it's already done so much damage that now when you pull it away, it's going to do more damage because it's going to set off that same reaction, except in reverse.
So I have a friend that she started losing her hair in patches, and she went and got tested, and they found she had too much aluminum in her body, and she did the chelation.
But that's, again, she did it I should say she did it after she had developed. This is what I'm trying to explain, and I'll get to it, is that this reaction affects neural development. And even as you do it as an adult, you still need to be very careful. And, aluminum only binds with certain agents. And so silica is the best one for aluminum to bind and to be excreted. But even then, you really have to it's best to be under the care of someone who knows what they're doing.
Which would be probably a biomedical doctor, I would guess.
Yes. And
don't ask your pediatrician to do this, because they're not going to know what you're talking about.
You do not want to, literally you have to be so careful. And when I get to the explanation of what it is and why, this will make sense. So basically, every single system in Houston's body didn't seem to suddenly, the regression was awful, the, chronic diarrhea, all the different symptoms, just everything. Well, it wasn't until later that I learned what was actually going on. And so this is where the explanation of aluminum comes in. So aluminum has, let's see if I can get this. There we go. Aluminum has 13 electrons. I don't know if you can see it. Okay. So what that means is we have to understand the chemical nature of aluminum as well as how electrons work. Electrons like to be in pairs, and that's very important. And in every element, the outer shell of the element is what determines the electronegativity of that particular element. It's how it responds chemically and electrically with other electrons, okay? And other elements and everything else. So the way it works is you have, in your first shell, you can have up to 2 electrons. You have 1, 2. Every shell after that, you can have up to 4 pairs, again, because electrons like to be in pairs. So you have 2, 2, 2, and 2. So now you have the 2 on the first shell, and then you have the 4 pairs. So now you're up to 10. So that means aluminum with 13 has got 3 electrons in its valence shell. That is what determines how electronegative it is. It has 1 solid pair and it has this 1 free electron, which is now stable enough to have enough strength to attract other electrons. Now, as it attracts other electrons, it pulls electrons from other cells. Now, those cells pull electrons from other cells. And then that creates,
and so on and so on
and so on and so on and so on and so on. And this continues until homeostasis is reached. In one person, that might be fairly quickly. And someone else, it goes on as basically cellular oxidative stress, almost like a fusion reaction, untampered with, just causing damage after damage after damage after damage to all these systems. That triggers the immune system. Now, whether it's triggered just a little bit, where you reach homeostasis and it triggers the immune system, or if it's triggered with this massive cellular oxidative stress, in that case, you're going to trigger something called a cytokine storm, especially with interleukin 6, which is part of your immune system. Interleukin 6 and it's called IL-6, and a massive cytokine storm is going to create absolute autoimmune havoc across the entire body. And it's something called hypercytokinemia. And I may have put an extra syllable in there, but it's quite a mouthful. But basically what it is it causes massive cellular and organ damage And that's exactly what occurs in these kids. It also causes inflammation of the gut, which, by the way, is developed before the brain is developed. The gut is actually what produces the neurotransmitters that the brain needs to communicate information. Then it causes encephalopathy, chronic inflammation in the brain. Now, why is that important? And this is why it's important. In normal development, we all come into this world as a spirit in a body.
Mhm.
That's what we are. We're spirits in bodies.
Mhm.
And the process of development is actually the continued process of knitting that spirit and mind to that body. And in normal development, you come into the world and you're wide open and you are taking in all of this information like a sponge.
Right.
And the more you take in, the more your body begins to figure out where it is in space, where you are in relationship to the environment, and where is the environment in relationship to you. When you're first born, you have zero motor, absolutely none. You have basic reflexes, no motor. All motor is learned, which is why this is the stupidest thing in the world to develop, IQ tests based on motor, because all motor is acquired, all of it. It has nothing to do with intelligence. That's totally and completely separate. That would be saying, like, I'm smart if I learn how to ride a bike, but I'm not smart if I don't know how to ride a bike. They have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
So anyway, as you begin to figure out where you are in space, this is a process of development. The brain begins the process of pruning sensory synapses. And the reason it does that is because it's at this point that the brain and that the neural motor pathways begin to form. That's what these basic reflexes, these primitive reflex integration that's happening, where you're learning to crawl, you're learning to try to get your hand to go to your mouth. That's where these actual basic skills are happening, is that's when you're developing the motor, and then the motor is integrating in with the pruned sensory synapses. So it doesn't all happen at once. It's not some big giant, prune all at once. It happens over time as more motor develops. And this motor foundation is critical for more fine motor that happens later on. So a little kid who is just learning a basic motor skill is the same amount of intelligent as he is when he's doing a fine motor skill. He's not more or less intelligent. He has learned more motor over time.
Mm-hmm.
He has developed more into his right or left brain, typically left brain. But these are just functions of motor and motor sensory integration. They have nothing to do with intelligence.
Right.
So
the synapses, I posted a video by the speech dude. He's on TikTok and Instagram, and I'm going to interject it here into this video.
I love that.
Just so that people can see.
Oh, yes.
So they can kind of see him explain it real quickly too, just to see that there's other people that talk about it besides you, but he doesn't understand the depth of it.
Right. Okay. And that's the important part.
Yeah. Here's a video from the speech dude from TikTok.
Non-autistic brain, or an holistic brain, and an autistic brain. What are the differences? This information's going to knock your socks off. These are neurons, and they're the building blocks of our brain. This one right here belongs to an holistic brain, a non-autistic brain, and this one belongs to an autistic brain. You see these little branches right here? Those are called synapses. Those allow the neurons to communicate and exchange information in the brain. So the question is, why does the autistic brain have more synapses than the non-autistic brain? When humans are born and they start to develop their brains, they get excess neurons and synapses, and the brain goes through a process called synaptic pruning. Synaptic pruning is where the brain starts to refine and remove unused connections. Non-autistic brain does a heck of a lot of pruning, up to about 50% by the time the person's a young adult. The autistic brain only reduces about 16% of those synapses. More synapses, more information to process. What's this mean for all you non-autistic people out there? Allow the autistic person some more time to process, because those synapses are firing back and forth. I'm going to do more neurobiology videos, and they're going to be better than any Netflix show that's out there, I promise you.
So this basically, and then I remember at the same time with you have neuroinflammation, well, what happens with chronic inflammation and encephalopathy is the brain will not prune those sensory synapses if it's inflamed. So that means the motor doesn't develop, and then the motor and the sensory don't integrate.
Mhm.
And that is where you get the brain body disconnect. And what is so important for us to understand is
Right. So an example, like a baby, when they're born, they just like have the startle reflex and
yes,
and they know how to suck, on
those
a bottle
basic, yeah.
or whatever.
The
They
little
can't even
funny,
grab their bottle in the
I
beginning.
know,
They
and
don't even know
like
how
the
to.
funny, I always love like whenever they're so adorable, but like
Mhm.
they go to like live and they hit themselves in the
Yeah.
face,
Yeah.
and they're like,
Yeah.
Well, it's because they're just still like, it's a new suit. They're trying it out. They haven't figured out how it works.
Right. Exactly. Right. There's so much
What
that a
is
baby
this?
has
It's
to
a hand.
learn.
What do these do?
Yep. Yep. And it's funny
So,
because when Robbie was a baby, he discovered his hands, but he used to do this and he used to just stare at them like all the time. And I didn't even realize he was stimming yet until later. I was like, oh, that was that weird thing that he used to do with his hands all the time.
yeah, and they're trying to, and that's of course when the inflammation happens, and then
Mhm.
they're really, because the demyelination happens. So even if they've started to develop some motor, whenever you demyelinate, this is why they regress. They lose
Yes.
skills, but then they still have the massive amounts of sensory synapses that are taking in everything. They're not developing the motor to integrate into the sensory. This creates the brain body disconnect, but they're still taking in all the sensory.
Mm.
And whenever, this is why, like little kids, what we don't realize is that they're taking in more than we are.
Mm.
That means they're taking in the metaphysical as well as the physical. This is why little kids can see angels.
Right.
Can
I've
see
seen a lot of those
people.
videos on
Yeah.
TikTok too. Well, I
Well,
mean,
you
once
should
you
put
watch
in
a
the
whole
one-
video, it keeps popping up on your feed, but of these little kids that are talking to somebody in the room and the mom's
Yeah.
like freaking out,
Yeah. Oh, please put one of those in there, but especially
Yeah.
the one you sent me. I love that one. That's so good.
Hi, Angel. Hi, Roxy. You want to Angel now? You want Autism? Remember? I see dead people.
What? Look at me.
I see dead people.
What?
I see dead people.
But so these kids, because this is, and I love that even the Charles Dickens quote that says, "It is no slight thing when those who are so fresh from God love us."
Yes. Yes.
And that's because
And I had read in a book where a woman that she has experiences like Houston and these other guys do of going to heaven and coming back, these spiritual experiences. And she said one time God showed her the womb of God and all the spirits are already existing inside his womb. She said they're kind of like little gingerbread men almost, but of light, made of light. And they're all floating around in there, and then they're born. They come and they attach themselves to a body and then come back. So she was saying that our spirits already existed before
Yes.
we were born. And that would explain I think it was Jeremiah where he said, where
Before
God
I
said,
was
before
even
you
in my
were formed
mother's-
in the womb, I knew you.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly right.
So, and I've even heard the story of one autistic kid that he remembers before he was born, or some of them
and
remember
Houston
coming through the
has-
birth canal and being born. Right.
In Houston, again, if you don't have those pruning,
Mhm.
this is what happens. This is also, and this is where I get into, and I explain how people think they've lived other lives when actually that's memory attached to matter. So it's like a memory file. And these are actually, so you have the memory file. So for example, Cindy, if you send me a file, it's not my memory. It's attached to my file. I have it in my hard drive, but it's not my memory. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so this is how, people who don't have as much pruning, just through their development, who did not go through as much of that sensory synapse pruning, or people who have an injury that prevents the pruning, they maintain those connections.
Mhm.
And this is why people can have gifts. And it is truly like a gift because they didn't go through that pruning process and they maintained that state. And there's even kids who talk about like remembering being able to have those experiences. Like they don't they don't have them now, but they remember when they did have those experiences.
Right. Yeah. So basically what you're saying is we're taking all these things in through our senses and even in our spirit. And then as you develop, your body starts to cut certain things off. It's like, we don't
Yes.
need this, we don't need that, we
Yes.
don't need this, we don't
Yes.
need that. And
And
that's
it does
why
that
as
for a
we
good
get
reason.
older.
It's to give you more control over your body.
Mm-hmm.
And as an infant, what is the main goal? It's to learn your surroundings. It's to develop your vestibular and your proprioceptive systems so that then you can use your body. The vestibular is actually the most primal sense that we have. It's where you are in space. And it's not listed like we learned 5 senses. It's actually more than that, like because you have your vestibular and your proprioceptive system as well. And those are physical senses. People don't realize that. But positioning is very critical. Knowing how much force to use, also very critical.
Yeah, Robbie didn't know that. He used to slam everything.
Well, and people look at it and they call it a behavior when
Mhm.
actually it was a proprioceptive issue.
Right. No, I could tell that he couldn't sense his own strength or something because he was always like slamming the doors, and like his drawers and his
Yeah.
dresser or the door, and he would keep hitting it and hitting, and I was like, you could tell he was a little bit off balance as he would go down. He would go down the stairs like a toddler, like boom, 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 boom.
And
boom,
it's because, again, the vestibular system. And so
Yeah.
in that case, you're feeling insecure, right? You're in a
Mhm.
heightened state of anxiety all the time because you're really not even sure where you are in relationship to your body or to the environment.
Right.
So there's this major disconnect, which creates a state of anxiety that exists all the time.
Right.
And anxiety, of course, triggers the limbic system, the amygdala, and that, of course, cuts off access to the frontal lobe, which they already have very little access to anyway because of the inflammation
Mm.
and the lack of motor development.
Yeah. And then
So
add
what the
the
vaccine-
visual
I'm
issues
sorry,
on
what
top
the-
of that. But
what the inoculations do.
yeah, I want to get back to the Tylenol thing, the acetaminophen.
Oh, yes. Okay. So the reason why Tylenol is mentioned, and it is not the cause, and this is important for people to understand, is we're dealing with something complex. And we are dealing with a set of circumstances that individually do not add up to the sum, but together do. And Dr. Koss in 1970, where's my phone? I had this pulled up. Dr. Koss in 1970 actually says something extraordinary. And he says, oh, and by the way, just so everybody knows who Dr. Koss is, he is was Harvard's Dr. Koss. He gave a speech in October 19th, 1970 to the annual meeting of Infectious Disease Society of America. And he told them that we have accepted some half-truths and had stopped searching for the whole truths. The principal half-truths were that medical research had stamped out the great killers of the past: tuberculosis, diphtheria, pneumonia, puerperal sepsis, etc., and that medical research and our superior system of medical care were major factors extending life expectancy, thus providing the American people with the highest level of health available in the world. That these are half-truths is known, but perhaps not as well as known as it should be. And then he proceeds to show graphs. Many of the diseases of which we are inoculated for weren't even in the graph because, you know why? They had already reached almost zero level. People don't even know that the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella, that when they introduced that vaccine, that the level of measles was almost nil.
And what is the
Before
purpose?
because it was money. It was a anyway, so he
Right. And all you have to do is spread fear.
yeah, right. Well, and it's okay. So then here we go. This is what he says. This decline in rates of certain disorders correlated roughly with socioeconomic circumstances is merely the most important happening in the history of health of man. What we have only the vaguest and most general notions about how it happened and by what mechanism, socioeconomic improvement and decreased rates of diseases run in parallel. Basically, what he's saying is what Dr. Suzanne Humphries said in Dissolving Illusions, which everyone needs to read. It's just mind-blowing. And she basically deconstructs all the illusions that we as society have believed. But what actually caused the tremendous decline in disease was addressing overcrowding, malnutrition, sanitarian conditions, stress, maternal health, providing an environment where families could thrive. That is actually what caused disease to decline. So really, if we want to change, if we want to prevent disease and create better health, we actually need to be working to create better environments, better homes, less stress, better food, better nutrition, better play, because that's actually where neural development happens, is through play. But if like no one can play because everybody's stressed out and working all the time, and you've got all these townhomes crammed together and there's no yard for anybody to go play, and you're you're spending your whole life sitting in traffic, watching a screen, going through a drive-through, these are unhealthy factors that will actually contribute to disease versus healthy factors, which is play, less stress, good food, a safe environment, community. This is actually what contributes to health.
Okay.
And it's not an inoculation.
But get back to the Tylenol and the glutathione.
Oh,
and what does
I'm so
glutathione-
sorry. Okay. So the reason I wanted to address that is just this whole point of that there's not one factor, right? It's not like I take Tylenol, therefore I have autism. You have to understand that this is a collective of many different factors.
Right.
And what Tylenol does is it lowers glutathione levels. And this is important for liver function. And when you understand what is actually in these inoculations, which includes the adjuvants, it includes formaldehyde, it includes actually other foreign substances that are diseases from other animals, other organisms. And that's what's all packaged in these products that are injected. And by the way, and there's also a function of where, like, you can ingest something and your body has a better chance of removing it through the liver than through intramuscular. That is actually very difficult for the body because the nanoparticle can allow it to bypass the blood-brain barrier. It can affect the body in an entirely different way than eating something can. And this puts an enormous amount of stress on the liver. So if you lower glutathione levels, then the liver cannot detoxify. And what the immune system is doing when it reacts is it's trying to get out foreign substances. It's trying to heal the body if it is, damaged of any foreign substance. It's trying to take out and prevent more damage. So if you lower the glutathione levels, you are not allowing the liver to do its job, which means the body has very lowered expectations of protecting itself. And that creates basically a perfect storm so that these other chemicals and even the actual attenuated viruses can actually do more damage. And this is, as far as, the effect of Tylenol in women, there absolutely is, there are instances of maternal onset. That is a real thing. It's not terribly common, but it does exist. And when we understand how critical the mother's
Onset of what?
Of maternal onset of autism, that would be people who say, oh, he always had it. He never regressed. It was always there. Now, to that, I would say, did they get vitamin K at birth? Did they get the Hep vac? Because the Hep B is just atrocious in its ability to cause neurological injury. And a lot of kids are getting this at day one. Well, at day one, you have no idea whether your child had something previously or not. So can maternal onset cause it? It can, because the mother's immune system is so critical to the baby's immune system. And Dr. Patterson is the first person who realized that it was the interleukin-6, the high levels of IL-6 in the mother was actually contributing to the high levels of IL-6 in the infant.
And what is that?
The interleukin-6.
What is that?
The cytokine storm.
Oh,
It's the IL-6 is not a cytokine storm in itself, but a ton of IL-6 is a cytokine storm.
And how does that happen in a mother?
Well, again, the Tylenol can lower if the mother is bombarded with any kind of substance and she's taking Tylenol and it lowers her glutathione levels, and basically her body's trying to fight off and detoxify, then, and it's not able to, then an interleukin 6 storm can occur.
Yeah, because that's what I've been trying to figure out, because I always had really bad sinuses. And I remember one of my pregnancies, and it probably was the one with Robbie, where I was having a lot of sinus issues, a lot of sinus headaches and sinus infections and that kind of stuff. And probably took Tylenol because that was the thing they said. That's
Yeah,
the
you
one thing
can
that's
take-
safe,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I remember asking if I could take some kind of sinus medicine, you know, because I couldn't breathe. And so that's just telling me that, you know, and my immune system was probably a mess
Well,
during that.
and it's this, what it should do is it should accentuate to us how critical maternal health is. And not even just maternal health, but even just the health of the man, because I mean, all of these things contribute to the health of the placenta, the health of the baby, the health of the development of the child, like how the mom is able to care for herself is a direct relation to how the baby is able to thrive and develop during development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then as we know, they'll tell you to take Tylenol when you're pregnant, but also when you give the baby a jab.
Yep.
They're telling you to give them
Yep.
Tylenol. My daughter was she was alternating ibuprofen with acetaminophen like every 4 hours, you know, because that's what the doctor told her to do. And I was like,
Yeah.
I can't. I was like,
No,
I have to just pray.
No, I know. And this is
I have to pray over the kids.
No, I know. And it's hard having knowledge and seeing other people get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the synapses a little bit, and we talked a little bit about little kids seeing things in the spirit. So that will lead me to the telepathy. When you did, when you spoke at my event, right, that we have on YouTube, we brought Houston on, and we showed to all the mothers, we proved that he could hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
And people can go back and watch that video, and it's right about the 1 hour mark. I've sent it to people multiple times, where you told me to bring up the random word generator. And I didn't want to do it because I didn't want people to think that we had planned it ahead of time. So I had the photographer do it, and he brought it up, and it brought up the word engine, and we showed it to everybody in the room. And I said, don't anybody say anything, just look at it, don't say a word. And Houston was blindfolded and had his back to the camera, and I texted it to you. And the second you got that text, he whipped off that blindfold, and he turned around and he tapped ENGINE, and the room went nuts. Yeah. Since then, the Telepathy Tapes came out. Actually, the Spellers movie came out. Yeah. Let's take this. Let's go in order. J.B. Hanley wrote the book Underestimated, then came the Spellers movie, then came the Telepathy Tapes podcast, which was #1, beat Joe Rogan and all that. And that was really fun for me because it was you and Tawny and Manisha, and I was like, I know all these people. I've had all of them on my podcast, but we didn't really talk about telepathy on it when they were on. So, and now they're working on the movie, right? And she's done filming, and I guess it's in the editing stage. So let's talk about that a little bit. The fun part of how did the whole thing come about, the Telepathy Tapes? I know that she didn't plan on doing a podcast. It was meant to be a movie because when I talked to you 3 years ago, I think you had mentioned it, but I didn't know what you were talking about.
So what happened was Underestimated came out right about the same time I was getting my book out. Right. And I remember thinking like, oh my goodness, is somebody else going to talk about it too? Right. Mm-hmm. And he didn't talk about the telepathy part. And just so everybody knows, I didn't actually use the word telepathy in my book. He said, I can hear thoughts. And so that was how I talked about it. It was, thought is energy, and energy behaves like energy. And so like, to me, it was more about how science and spirit coexist perfectly. That was what it was to me. And even though this does, of course, because it is a human rights issue, it absolutely affects, communication rights, education rights, and everything else. And I address all of that in our book. But when the book came out, I spoke with a writer who was, bestseller, and he met Houston, saw the telepathy, and he said, "I want to help you. Let me find a book agent." And so as he's talking to book agents, no one believes him. Right. And he says, "You need a scientist. That's the only way that someone will even come close to touching this book, is if you get a scientist." So I go and I find Dr. Powell is the only person I could find who's actually doing research. And I sent her an email. She messaged me back almost immediately and said, "How do you know?" And I said, "Well, because he's doing it with me." And she said, can I meet him? Can I test him? And I said, "Of course." And he did like 100% every single test. And she was like, "Wow, he's amazing." And she said, "I'm actually working with a director doing a film, a documentary about my research. Would you be interested in participating?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to meet her. And yeah, let's talk." And so we met, and she was blown away by Houston. And of course, that's Kai Dickens. And so that was the beginning. And at that point, she said, "Can we come to Atlanta?" And I said, "Sure, we've got more friends that can do it too." And of course, I asked Libby, and Libby's like, "Yes," and John Paul was like through the roof. He said, "It has to be done." And that was how it began. And obviously we had no idea what was going to happen.
Yeah,
But
with
they
John
came
Paul.
to Atlanta, right? They came to Atlanta and they did all these tests. And that was all to get what they call a sizzle reel, which is what you take to do a pitch to the
Right.
networks.
Right.
And so that's what happened. She got this sizzle reel together. She was so excited, and she went and started pitching to all these different networks. And all the networks came back saying, "No one would be interested in this. It affects too few people. Our directives are crime and celebrity. No one would be interested in this." And the producers that she actually pitched to were all like crying and like blown away, but it was like the big top executives, right? That no one believed in it. And we were just in shock. Like, what do you mean this doesn't it affects every single human being. How does this not affect anyone? And so that just was kind of a head scratcher. We didn't know what to, like, how do you convince them that this matters? To me, this is the most important news story in the world, and it's not being talked about in the media. It's just shocking to me. So then she had this idea, "I'm going to do a podcast. That's the only way I feel like we can prove to them." And the whole point was to prove to the networks that there is interest. That was the whole idea. So in our mind, if we could get like 3%, like we could prove that there's like enough reach. And we had no expectation that it was going to blow up the way it did. Of course, before she got to that point, John Paul had passed away. And I mean, I'm the one that called Kai to tell her, and it was just unbelievable. No one, it was kind of like, what do we do now? And then, of course, immediately all of these, spellers, like they knew about it before we knew about it. And of course, we shared that part with Kai, and the story just kept getting more and more and more miraculous.
Wait, the spellers knew about what? That John Paul was going to go to heaven?
No, that they knew he died before we knew he died.
Okay.
Like, I mean, before I knew he died, and like before their parents knew, they knew. And so just basically the whole point of that is that our idea of life and existence is limited by our senses. And the reality is there's just much more than we realize. The world is a lot stranger and more wonderful and exciting and brilliant than we have been led to believe.
Mm-hmm. I just like how you explain the whole thing with the synapses in the brain about the how that kind of explains
Well,
how
it is
they're
how it
able to do
explains it.
this and we're
This-
not.
This is why the little ones, this is what I was talking about. Like this is why the little ones can still, because they haven't gone through that pruning process
Right.
like we have, like the adults. So this is actually spirit to spirit communication. This is how we communicate. People who have had near-death experiences all talk about being able to.
Boom. Yes.
Yeah.
So I was going to say, here, I'm going to hold up another book. I've been reading this. Imagine.
Oh, I have that
Heaven.
book. Isn't it wonderful?
Yes. Yeah. So John Burke wrote this, and
Yeah.
he's interviewed 1,500 people that all had near-death experiences.
And they all say the same thing.
They all do. They
Mhm.
they communicate mentally. You
Yes.
don't need to use words.
The reason that we use words is because we have physical bodies.
Right.
But because they're not connected to their physical body, they retain that spirit to spirit connection, that spirit to spirit communication. And whenever you like,
Explain what you mean, because I know what you mean, but explain to the listeners what you mean that they're not connected to their bodies.
so the way we're connected to our body is through motor. It's through the transmission of chemical transmitters that the gut produces, sends to the brain. The brain then has the chemical transmissions, and they travel along neural motor pathways. Those communicate to the motor, the neural motor sensory receptors in the muscles, which then actually move the body. And if the inflammation is happening, if the motor pathways are demyelinated,
Well, that sounds like the
motor-
mind-body disconnect that they talk about all the time with spelling
it
to
is,
communicate.
but that's what it is.
But also, though, like Houston is not aware where his body is in space.
That's the vestibular system.
Okay, so that's different.
No, it's part of, remember I was talking about primal senses? Like
Mhm.
that is like your vestibular sense is everywhere. It's what lets you know where your hands are, where your feet are.
Right.
And so basically, if a bomb goes off, which is what the cytokine storm is, it loses those connections. And so now it doesn't know where it is anymore. Up is down, down is up. It's right, back is front, front is back. Everything is just a mess. And so what happens is they develop, because they are missing those connections, instead of developing the motor pathways to develop into their body, which is what we all do, they continue to develop, but they develop deeper and deeper into their etheric body, into their spirit. And this is why you find these older ones who have these like incredible gifts, and the little ones still have gifts too, but they may not have figured out yet how to use them. Whereas the older ones have figured out how to use their gifts. They figured out, okay, this is where I excel. I excel at this.
Right.
And the little ones are kind of like, it's almost like they've gone into, a big giant playroom and they haven't figured out where all the toys are. They're still discovering.
Yes.
Whereas the older ones go, I know exactly where I excel. I'm going to do this. And they do.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Because some of the questions that I see of moms of the little ones, I'm like, okay, they don't understand yet, what the older kids know.
Well, and it's because they're still discovering.
Right.
And Houston, didn't quite realize what was possible in the beginning. In the beginning, he was terrified. And he talks about, he writes about it, how being terrified, because the message he was trying to get out of his mouth wouldn't come out. And then feeling like, and the things that he did as a little kid makes so much sense because he was trying to feel his body. He was pushing his head on the ground. He was holding rocks and sticks in his hand. He was, throwing himself in water. He was trying to do anything he could to activate his vestibular system to let his brain know where his body was, so that he was trying to send messages and couldn't. He couldn't. The inflammation was so bad. I still remember that it kills me because there's this one memory I have of him, or more than one, but two really bad ones in particular, of him just literally running around screaming, just screaming. I could tell he was in absolute agony. His brain was on fire.
Mm.
And I remember calling the doctor, just like, help, 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 help.
That
And
was
he
after one of the jabs, no?
Mhm. And he was like, just give him charcoal. And it was he was annoyed,
Mm.
annoyed that I had bothered him on a Saturday.
My God. And your kid's brain is on fire. And you didn't even know because you couldn't
I didn't even know.
communicate.
I didn't
You
even
couldn't
do
even
anything.
communicate, but you could tell he was in pain. Something's definitely wrong.
And then, of course, then you realizing, and he said that, like, he had a difficult time because he could hear everything because of the synesthesia, because he could see and hear and see and taste and smell and see the taste. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because it's just it took him forever to figure out what the original source of sensory information was.
Right.
So he said, he goes, I had to learn how you were reacting to something to figure out what the real source of sensory input was.
Wow.
So if it would be like, he could see a light, but I am like hearing a sound. You see what I mean?
Yes, right. Because
trying
it's
to go,
synesthesia,
okay,
right?
right.
So people
So
understand
she
what
actually-
synesthesia is, right? So
Yeah.
when he hears music, he sees colors
Right.
and all that. Yeah. It's like multiple things going on.
Yeah. So it took him, and I think for just years, it was just trying to figure out the part that is so critical to understand is the emotional development during this time. If you're emotionally developing while your brain is on fire, no, you can't speak. Everyone's treating you like you don't understand, and you don't have control over your body. The emotional impact of all of that on you is so traumatic. And the trauma has long-term psychological and physiological effects on us. It just does. And they still react with trauma. Even if the trauma isn't like the original, they still have that. And we all do. This is what PTSD is, where the original trauma isn't there, but you're still having the same reaction.
Sure. Well, that would explain why they refuse to go into a restaurant or whatever, because they remember something.
Yeah. And their memories are incredible because they actually do not have the myelination or the pruning that we have.
Oh my gosh.
Their memories
to prune stuff out.
We're constantly like delete.
Oh
delete.
yeah.
They're like, nope, it's all here.
Oh my gosh. There's so much going on in there. So much.
But I find them to be the most extraordinary human beings, not actually because of their gifts, but because of their hope.
Well, they're very loving and forgiving. I mean, once they start spelling, the parents are feeling all this guilt that we talked about in the beginning, and all of them are like, "It's okay, Mom, you didn't know."
I would say there are some that are angry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes. But generally,
eventually,
though, they're with their parents, though, they're like, "You didn't know, though."
Well, eventually they get to a place of like Houston had, anger that he expressed to me, and I was intent that he would be able to say whatever he needed to say. Because if you had not been able to say, I didn't want to contribute to the trauma anymore. I wanted him to. And what was so interesting was after, he released this anger, it was just love upon blessing. It was love. Then it was like, just this desire to be known. And from me, the desire to know him. And that was such a wonderful place to be in. And then it was me trying to understand what he was experiencing physically. And that's where I began all of that research, was just trying to figure all of this out.
Right. Now, speaking of trauma, let's talk about ABA.
My favorite topic.
Because, as we know, ABA just deals with behavior, and they're not getting to the root cause of the behavior.
Actually,
but also, but I heard you say something in another interview, though, that I wanted to touch on, is when they get into loops, and they start repeating phrases over and over again. It's usually something that they were taught in ABA, or it could have been speech, that, a phrase that they repeatedly tried to get them to say, because I know when they're very young, they try to deal with the eye contact, and they try to teach them how to have conversations with people, and they'll teach them to say, when you introduce, when you say hello to someone, you respond back, hello, how are you today? And then that could turn into a loop. Hello, how are you today? Hello, how are you today? Hello, how are you? So explain a little bit about that.
The brain is designed to loop. That's actually how it works. You take in sensory, you analyze the sensory, you develop a motor plan for a motor response, you execute the motor, pick up new sensory, and then the whole cycle starts again. Because they've been cut off from their motor, they've been cut off from their motor planning. And what has been inserted instead is this myelinated motor, where it goes over and over and over and over and does the same thing. So there's several different types of motor. You've got reflexive motor, you've got impulsive motor. Let me explain impulsive motor very quickly. Where you sat there and you ate chip after chip after chip, even though you're like, stop, oh my gosh, stop, stop eating these chips. Why am I eating?
Mm-hmm.
You just keep doing something over and over, or you're like tapping your foot over and over again, and you're like, and somebody's like, stop it, and you're like, I didn't even realize I was doing it. Oh my gosh, or these are these, and a lot of them have a relationship to anxiety. So it's basically our nervous system is stressed. And so we'll do something over and over and over again to try to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system to calm ourselves. So a lot of these little things that are repetitive or impulsive are actually trying to create a calming effect or seek a sensory need in order to appease the nervous system. Those can be destructive at times. And what happens though is a lot of people interpret those impulsive or sensory seeking or trying to calm the nervous system as a behavior. And so it's called a behavior. Oh, they do this. They need to stop that behavior. So here, the very thing that you can't control is now a behavior and labeled a behavior, and you're treated like it's a behavior, even though you're not consciously executing that motor. So that's one type of motor. Then we have myelinated motor. Myelinated motor is where you, for example, can drive your car home and you literally pull in the driveway. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember operating the vehicle.
I do that so many times. Yeah. I get on autopilot and I start driving to certain places.
It's kind of terrifying because you're like, I was not consciously doing that at all. My brain was somewhere else.
For sure.
But your body is now completely operating on its own. Mm-hmm. And that is myelinated motor. And ABA, literally, that is what it is. They myelinate over and over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And so
they are
literally myelinating brains that are so susceptible to myelination. Mm. And this is why spelling is so different, because the other type of motor is intentional motor. Intentional motor is complicated. It's dynamic. It is also in the process. You have to think about dynamic motor and this is what intentional motor is it's in the state of learning a new skill. So for example, if I learn a dance and I'm in the beginning stages of learning it, it's hard. It's difficult. When I do it over and over and over again, I've now myelinated it and I don't have to think about it anymore. But dynamic motor is the part where you're learning and you're having to execute new motor planning. And that is what intentional speech and intentional body control is. It's dynamic, purposeful, intentional, nuanced movement. Mm-hmm. And whenever you have a anxiety disorder, which most of our kids do because they're in a constant state of anxiety, your amygdala and limbic system are triggered. And so you're cut off from the frontal lobe, which is where that dynamic motor is processed. And this is why spelling is so wonderful, because you are creating 26 motor pathways to different letters, where they can literally take 26 motor pathways and create a new dance every single sentence.
So this summer, we hosted our beach bash my foundation, and we do this every summer, and we have like a mini vacation.
Mhm.
And what a wonderful thing that happened was that this young man, Ricky, just to show you the difference, is that last year, or I think 2 years ago, we had bingo, and I put out prizes for them, and he picked this stuffed animal penguin that he wanted that year. And he just loved that stuffed animal, and it was adorable. And when he went to bed that night, his mom took a picture of him sleeping with the stuffed animal penguin and sent it to me. And we all call him Ricky, and we treat him like a baby, and he's adorable and he's cute and all that. Well, now, back in December of this past year, we did a pool party, and there was a mom there that came with a speller. And I knew that Ricky's mom had taken RPM class. She had tried the spelling with him, but she gave up. She didn't think it was going to go very well. So I said, you two need to talk.
Mhm.
So I put them together, and they went off and sat together. And this other mom kind of got on her case. She's like, you need to try again. Don't quit. And you need to do it and stick with it and don't give up.
Mhm.
So she did. She sat down, she buckled down, she started spelling, and Ricky became open.
Mm.
So now, this summer, we had the beach bash, and Ricky is spelling up a storm, and he's talking to everybody. But this is the thing that I want. I keep trying to talk on Facebook to people and telling them about spelling, and some of them don't listen to me. And I think it's because they think, well, my son can already speak.
Oh,
Like,
so
no,
yeah.
no, no, no,
Oh,
no.
that's a good one.
So
Okay.
here's the thing.
Mhm.
And this was what was so fascinating to me, to watch Ricky do this. He's talking about things in a loop,
Mhm.
and he's spelling something completely different.
Yes.
So he kept saying, when I was talking to him, he kept saying, gotta play football, don't have a helmet. Gotta play football, don't have a helmet. Gotta play football. And meanwhile, his fingers are going a mile in a minute, and he's having a conversation with Miss Patty, one of my special ed teachers, who I've been trying to get her on board with the spelling, and she just wasn't, she's like, okay, yeah, whatever, until she saw this. And Ricky is tapping out to her, Patty, you need to stop worrying about the kids, and you need to start working with the parents. You need to work with the parents, and you should start a support group for them. And like having this whole adult conversation while his mouth is saying something complete, and her jaw just dropped. She could not. She was like,
This is
what?
again. They have no ability to motor plan. So there's this thing called the arcuate fasciculus
Mhm.
that is in your brain that goes, and the cerebellum is so important to all of this. And basically, there is a disconnect, and so the different parts of the body can't speak to each other. But anyway, so there's this thing called the arcuate fasciculus, where you've got the Wernicke's area of the brain and the Broca's area of the brain.
Yes.
And the arcuate fasciculus is a set of sensory motor cortexes that choreographs, motor plans, and executes all of the necessary motor impulses that are involved with speech. Speech requires the collective coordination of 7 different body systems and over 100 different muscles, all working simultaneously. 7 different body systems all have to communicate
Wow.
and coordinate perfectly.
And we
So
do it
what-
without thinking.
Right. Now, what happens, and this is where we have different types of motor pathways, right? So intentional motor, which is what we are able to do with speech, these are long, complicated, arduous motor pathways. Okay. And then you've got you've got the impulse, which is super fast and the motor pathway is like wide and fast. Okay. And the myelinated, of course, it creates what it is myelin. And it creates insulation on the actual motor pathway. So that goes really fast. So these motor impulses. So this speech that's intentional, even if they could coordinate all of that, the motor pathway, it takes so long to execute the motor plan that the impulsive or the myelinated has happened so many times that nobody is even like, they may finally get a word out, but it might be like several minutes later that they finally can coordinate that to get the word out, even if they did have some speech. And it's because one fires before the other. But we don't respond in conversations that way. Well, I said this, then he said that. So he must be responding to me, even though that was a myelinated or an impulsive set of motor impulses that fired. And Houston said that his mouth would force things out of it that he never wanted to say. And it's literally like not having access to that. And that's what's going on. So the ones with some speech, you know, I find those to actually be, it's sometimes very hard for parents because they still are so used to listening to the speech and responding to that speech.
Right.
And
Like
that's
the boy in your book that you said, he kept saying park. And the parents kept taking him to the park. And then when he spelled, he's like, I know I'm saying I want to go to the park, but I don't want to go to the park.
Yeah. I mean, how terrible for your body to be saying all these things and people responding to what you're saying, and that's not what you want.
Right.
And Houston has many times told me, do not listen to my mouth.
Right.
Only listen to my
Right.
spelling.
Right. Oh, yeah. And the other book that I'm reading, which I got it ahead of time, I got sent a copy, is Decoding Foodie.
Oh my gosh, did you really?
Not coming out till November, but I got a special copy.
I just sent him my address. So, well, you should tell
You think I'm such a voracious reader, right? With all these books. But Cody, he kept saying Barney, and they kept giving him Barney videos. And he's like, I can't stand Barney. Do not show me another Barney video. But the parents are trained to do, you know, oh, well, he keeps saying Barney. He must want Barney.
Yeah. And like, Houston is obsessed with all these Disney stuff, right? And he does not want any of it. He's like, do not let me. But of course, I have to be the guard because his body wants to stem. His body wants to stem on those things.
I keep saying it's like there's two different people.
Yes, it really is. He says, Houston describes it. He says, it's like I'm living in an enemy combatant. And his body is his enemy. This is why they have like names for their body. Yes. Because their bodies work against them.
Right.
And that's because they have basically, Houston describes it like imagine a plane was in the air, but no one was piloting it. The plane would be doing all sorts of things. It would be moving. It would be but no one is navigating it.
Right.
And that's what's happening is you have this impulsive body that has like no navigation, no pilot. And it's not because the pilot isn't there. The pilot is there, but the pilot's hands have been tied. The pilot's ability to execute the directions have been stifled.
What's going on with Houston, like spiritually? Like anything in particular? Any like visitations or?
Well,
anything?
Houston is honestly, it's a lot of spiritual battles right now. I mean, it's very much like he sees the bigger picture,
right?
What's going on spiritually,
right?
And that's his focus. His focus is to lead others, to encourage them, to teach them how to believe, to be a herald, and to basically stand for truth and not budge. And that's what he's doing.
That sounds like Charlie Kirk, which I was going to ask you. Did he have anything to say about that?
Yes, he did.
Can you share it? Or
I don't want to.
That's okay. You don't have.
Yeah, he was.
It's only because you said there's a spiritual battle. So I've seen posts by parents that there was a big spiritual battle going on after Charlie died. And kids are being affected by it because they can see angels and demons and they can see this spiritual battle that's going on.
That was a significant spiritual event is what people should know from that. And the impact it should have on us is to be like Charlie, to be fearless. To be truth tellers, to say the hard things, to confront evil.
Right.
And we've been conditioned for a long time to not call things evil. And I'm going to. I feel like I have, but I need to do it fearlessly now. And yes, that might mean that I hurt people's feelings. And I would rather tell them the truth than safeguard their feelings. I try to do both, but I'm not always able to do so because sometimes the truth confronts and convicts, and that's not always a pleasant or painless experience.
Right. Just today, somebody asked me, had I heard the conspiracy theory that Charlie Kirk is not really dead? That's kind of what I wanted to know.
Oh my word.
I'm like, listen, I love my conspiracy theories. I really
Okay,
do. But
so
this
I
one,
actually
I'm not really buying
there's
into. This is what I'm
there's a young girl, Madison, that was actually there. That I did an interview with her, and she lives there and was actually there when the whole thing happened. And
in Utah, you mean?
in Utah,
Oh, okay.
she was actually in the
In the
crowd.
audience? Okay.
Yeah, and she addresses this, and I mean, it's obviously I have the same perspective that everybody else has, right? That we saw,
Mhm.
and she was there, and she said she goes off on it. And how dare people say that when I was there? I saw it with
Right.
my own eyes,
Right.
and honestly, like, people need to know that while there are certainly conspiracy theories that have been validated, that there's also a lot of lies, just flat out lies. And to repeat lies for it really becomes gossip, and it's extremely destructive. And people need to be careful with their words and what they say, and they need to be responsible for their words. And if you are saying something just for the sake of like being controversial, maybe you should look at your heart.
Mhm. Yeah. I do know somebody that has a TikTok account, and he purposely puts controversial stuff on just to get views.
Yeah, and
It's not that he believes any of it, because he had a Republican channel and he had a Democrat channel. Like,
oh, that's so
and it's just to stir up the controversy and just
Yeah.
to get the views. It's
well,
not
you know what,
anything
that
he
actually
believes in.
God talks about that in the Bible, and it's listed under the things he hates, which is to sow discord among the brethren. So sowing discord is something that God hates. He hates it. It's listed under 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to them, and that is one of them.
That's a good point.
So we should be careful with what we say. And this is why I actually, before I talked, even though I knew in my heart, because I had seen Houston's blood test all those years ago, I wanted to know what I was talking about. I wanted to understand why and how that caused my son's regression before I spoke out about it. And so it took me a very long time to understand what had happened, the complexity of it. And now I wanted to make sure that I was speaking from a place of responsibility and knowledge, not just anger or fear or baiting or blaming. I wanted to know what I was talking about.
The last thing that I wanted to hit on was the Hill, which anybody that's listened to the telepathy tapes now, I feel like everybody knows about the Hill now. But when I had first interviewed you and talked to you, I didn't know, we didn't talk about the Hill. I didn't know anything about it. And then after you spoke at my event, I called you like a week later just to go over everything that happened. And you said to me, oh yeah, there was a lot of talk on the Hill about it. I was like, wait, what? What's the Hill? What are you talking about? And then you explained it to me, what it was, that it's a place that they go to meet up and to speak.
And again, it's a non-physical place, and because they can go with their spirit, with their mind, they don't need their body to go there, so they can communicate without being in the same place. It's just like us being able to communicate with someone like you and I are now talking, and we are not together. Our bodies are not in the same place.
Right.
But through the transmission of electromagnetic energy, we are. Same idea.
Right. Well, again, bringing back the books about the near-death experiences, right? And they communicate in their mind. They said that there's really no need for words. But a lot of them talk about a place that they go to that they describe the flowers, and first it's the light, about this bright, bright, bright light, but it's a beautiful light and it's flooded with love, and it's so bright, but it doesn't hurt their eyes. And then they end up in a place that has colors that they've never seen before here on this earth. It's so colorful, at the flowers and the music. And they describe this place. But there's a wall, and they know the city's beyond the wall, and they know that if they go on the other side of the wall, they can't come back. So it's basically describing a side outside the
Yes,
the,
that's exactly
the
right.
big
So
city, right?
basically
So
what
when I've interviewed people about the hill, or when I've asked people, spellers, about have you gone to heaven, they describe the same thing. They talk about the flowers and it looks like a garden. And I think they describe the hill. I know it's got grass, but I think it has flowers. But it sounds to me like the same type of description as these near-death experiences to me.
So what I think, and I obviously haven't been there myself, so I am trying to gather from what the experiences that they've shared. And of course, I always try to go back to scripture in everything and try to have an understanding of this. But I believe that it is very much like there is a non-physical place that is a realm, but it's not the kingdom of God. And I obviously, God is eternal. That means you, like, no matter how deep you go, there's more to him. He's literally as deep and deep, and as wide and as high, and there's just no depth to him. So we can keep, or I shouldn't say there's no end to the depth, because it's just more and more and more and more of him. It appears to me is, Paul talks about going to the third heaven. He said, not whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, God knows. But there was a man who went to the third heaven. So that clearly means there's a first and a second one. I would think that the first one is probably atmosphere, sky, right?
That's what I've heard.
Yeah. And that I do think that there is this interim area where, and this, Houston talks about this area, and that is where souls who haven't yet made a decision are. Because one of the things that was so challenging for me was when Houston I asked him to describe heaven, and he said it so matter-of-factly, like it's the most obvious thing in the world. And he goes, well, of course, Jesus is always healing someone. And I'm like, what? What do you mean he's healing someone? What do you mean? My mind just literally exploded. And then he goes, explaining heaven to you takes great elasticity. And I'm like, try. Just give it a shot, okay? And he goes, well, really, it's like he replenishes them to deal with their repentance. And that made sense to me. And then he went on to describe that no matter what, it's always Christ is the only way that you can get to the Father. It's only by believing in Christ. And he talked about Moses being there with them, with these people that haven't yet, or he goes, they all have to see that Jesus is who he says he is. And he said Moses is in there with him. And then I was like, wait a second, that makes sense, because like Moses led people through the wilderness to the promised land. Like that makes sense. And that, and of course, then it's all having purpose and all having, a mission and jobs and everything else. And that, it says, this is what Jesus says. He said, this is the will of God, that we believe in him who he sent. That is the will of God. And whether it is on this earth or in these other places, that is still the will of God, for us to believe on him who he sent. And so I can't,
but they say that Jesus is on the hill also.
But Jesus can be anywhere. He's the creator of all things. So he's,
but also though, that angels are surrounding it too. So that people that try to get in, that would have bad intentions, cannot get in there. Because that was what I was worried about when that all came out on the telepathy tapes. I'm like, oh, you're going to have every kook out there is going to be trying to.
I think there probably are people that are, trying to ascend through whatever their meditation is and everything else. Correct. But we do have older spellers who are wise, guiding and trying to. Oh, I have to tell you this one story. It's really funny. But someone was sharing this story, and they were saying that that Houston was described it was like, who's the big dog, like up on the hill, right? And they were like, that's Houston. And they described him like a moose, that he was like so huge that he was like a moose.
That's fine. Well, yeah, because every speller that I've asked, do you know Houston? They say yes.
Yeah.
They all know him.
And he knows his role. His role is to be a protector, a defender, a guide,
He's like the big brother.
yes. And that is what he always wanted to be. And what the injury, the neurological injury, prevented him from being to his own siblings. And we have we're a struggling family. Like, we have all kinds of complex relationships because of that one neurological injury and the bomb that went off in our family because of his injury. And it has affected, all of our relationships with each other, with me, and as well as roles, who had what role, because Houston's role was to be the big brother. That was his role, and it was robbed from him.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Robbie was the baby, even though he wasn't the youngest. Yeah.
And so, that's an issue that we have to deal with in our family. And Houston saw the calling to be what he always should have been for others. And he's answered that call quite effectively.
Yeah, I think so. So I had texted this to you, you and Tawny, I think. I don't think Libby was on that text, but that I had this dream, and it was around that time of that. It was around the time of that retreat that you spoke. So I had this dream, and I was outside by my car, and all these baseball teams were walking past me. There was
I remember this.
hundreds and hundreds of them, and they were wearing their team shirts, and they were on their way to like a baseball tournament, and they went to a hill, and they went up this grassy hill. And as they were walking by me, though, one of them threw a baseball to me, and I missed it, and I dropped the ball. And this was all outside a hotel. And when I went into the hotel, there was all these moms of these autistic kids, and there were 2 rooms, and they were lined up at a room that was empty and had no food. And in the other room, they had all the food out. So I told all the women, I said, no, if you want to get fed, come in this other room. Here's where all the food is. There's this spread out for you. But the part that bothers me is that I dropped the ball, and I felt like they were trying to communicate something to me. I know that because when I remember a dream and all these details, and and it's very vivid and bright, I know that it's from God, So I that was the one question I had for Houston for him was, what was it? What was that message? What did I miss? What's the ball that I dropped?
Well, if you did drop a ball, you've picked it up, and you're doing quite the great job of making sure that ball is still in play.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep the game going here, keeping the ball rolling.
And here's the thing: I have not. This is a very strange and complicated journey that I'm on, and I haven't, navigated it perfectly. And things have happened to me during this process that have made it more complicated to do the things that I thought were the right things to do. And, priorities, and you just all sorts of different things. And, there are things that I want to be doing with Houston that I can't be doing with him because I have to work full time. And so what we have to do is just keep doing the very, very best we can, keep using our mouths, keep teaching, keep building an army, I think is really what we are called to do. And I think the spiritual call is to do what, whenever they were rebuilding the temple, that they were building, but they had their swords. They had to be building, and they had to be ready to fight. And I feel like we have not been at this point given the opportunity to only do the fighting, which is what I want to do. I just want to fight and advocate for our kids. That's all I want to do. But we have to keep surviving too, and keep creating, building the things, building the army, honestly, raising this army. That's what right now, that is the stage that we are in.
Right.
And, if I'm going to do anything with my time, it is to feed myself God's word and be in prayer and be in the word, because that is going to be the truth that sustains me when all of these other things come up. I do think we need to be very wise because there are traps, there are snares, there are, this is something I was talking about with Tani, and she's so wise. And we've got to be very careful because this is such a strange phenomena that we were never raised to even acknowledge existed. And so now we're all trying to figure this out, and we have to make sure that everything goes back, that we have our root in scripture for everything, and that we are testing the spirits, that we are testing, we're not just accepting everything somebody says, but we're testing it. Does it align with what God says?
Mm-hmm.
Does it align with God's character? Does it align with, what is the will of God? And yes, that's harder to do than just reacting and just going along the thing, but that's actually what we're called to do. And the reason why God wants us to do that is because that's safer. He wants us to be wise. He says to be as innocent as dove and as wise as
wise as a serpent and innocent as a dove. Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to do. And we're not going to do it perfectly. And we are going to drop some balls. And, and that's just how it is. And you don't stop playing because you dropped a ball. You pick up the ball and you keep going.
That's true. That is a perfect analogy, right? The game's not over because you dropped one ball. You got to get back in the game, keep going.
Yeah.
All right, Katie, I'm going to let you go because it's getting late. It's dinner time. Houston's got to eat.
He's hungry.
I know. We don't want him to get hangry.
Yeah, when we're hungry, we don't want to go.
Yeah, you're right. We don't want to cross over there, right? All right. Thank you so much for being here today.
You are so welcome. I'm so glad. I'm so glad the whole schedule opened. I'm like, I can do it. I can do it. Yes.
Yeah, that was great. That was perfect. I couldn't believe I got you so fast too.
Yeah.
There's other people that I have to chase down for months.
Well, and I can be that because just certain times of my life, things come up and I'm just like swamped. And I was just really grateful that I had this moment to kind of like, yes, I can do it. And I'm just going to say yes and do it because if I wait, next week will be full.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for being here. All right. Thanks, Katie. Have a great day. Bye. That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed listening and it helped you gain a new perspective. To learn more about our children's book series, Robbie's World and His Spectrum of Adventures, or to learn more about what we do at Robbie's World Foundation, simply visit our website at robbiesworldbook.com.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to join us again on our next episode of Spectrum Perspectives.